Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am Sid Alpha. I had recorded a fairly lengthy video last night at an extremely late hour in regards to a rather vitriolic series of DMs that were sent to me on Twitter, but given the late hour I hadn't had a chance to review it or post it online. So I opted to wait, and I'm almost sorry I did. Apparently going more than 12 hours without a video has reduced new subscribers to a crawl comparative to what they've been for the past month. But given the quality of the statements I was faced with, I was not able to deal with a brush with what amounted to being a clearly insane person with any form of coherence or rationality of my own. And given the subject matter, I'm glad that I did. You see, it definitely would not have been me at my best. Of course, 1 in the morning, when you typically have to wake up at 6, is rarely anyone's best. Also, given the further events of today surrounding Jim Sterling's review of the new Legend of Zelda, also mixed with the trolls that now seem to be focusing on me in some form of guilt by association, means that I have a fair amount to talk about. And being all this ties together quite nicely, I decided that I just could not pass up the opportunity to soapbox for a few minutes. So let's start with events surrounding Stickly Games. So Stickly apparently seems completely and utterly incapable of not digging themselves into that hole in the ground even further. In a recent addendum on their Steam forums, Stickly Games publicly posted that they would be issuing a DMCA takedown of Jim Sterling's video. And I do apologize for not showing an image of the original developer update. Apparently they took it down at some point today, and I had forgotten to grab a snip of that particular comment. Also, owing to the fact that Jim Sterling enjoys a relative amount of protection by YouTube in regards to fraudulent DMCA claims, Stickly may be at the end of the very short rope with which they have tied around their own necks. Just to catch anyone up who isn't aware of what is going on, Jim Sterling had posted a review of Stickly Games' early access title Airport Master, in which he was fairly indifferent towards it, neither liking nor disliking it, although I personally would have been bored to tears. Now, that again would have been the end of it, but Stickly Games, with a giant stick up their asses, a fair amount of fake chirpy optimism, and an unenforceable EULA in hand, decided that while it might not be wise to go after Jim's video with a DMCA write-off, as they wanted to try and force him to take it down himself and seek their permission to post a video on their game, they decided the best way to go about that was to issue a trademark dispute on the video. And of course that blew up squarely in their faces, and rightfully so, which brings about their apparent decision to attempt a DMCA, which they are still attempting to rely on their EULA as their final crutch, desperately clinging to it as their last shred of feigned legitimacy as they fight desperately to control the narrative of what is quickly becoming their own demise. You see, there is one thing that these special snowflakes at Stickly fail to understand. Games reviews, particularly video reviews, are protected under fair use. Also, in addition to that, the trademark dispute was wholly fraudulent, and not to mention any form of DMCA would be so as well, and no matter how you phrase your EULA, it is unenforceable. No contract, written or otherwise, can prevent fair critique and review of a product, and digital goods are still products last time I checked. And while we're at it, the simple fact that Stickly Games would even attempt to file any form of dispute in regards to a critique of their game is beyond ludicrous, considering they themselves make use of copywritten imagery in their game, illustrated here. Now, I do so hope Stickly Games sought permission from PepsiCo for the use of their branding. Otherwise, the email that I sent off to Frito-Lay's designated agent to receive notifications of claimed copyright infringement, Janet Zimmer of PepsiCo, is going to be extremely embarrassing for them. You see, dear viewer, I really do grow weary of these pretentious, money-grubbing, amoral hacks that cry foul every time there is a bit of honest critique leveraged against them, and who resort to any means necessary, including violating the law, to attempt to silence games critics. I have faced it multiple times only recently, and I expect I will face it several more times, but when faced with something like this, I think it is only fair to fight fire with fire. They wish to turn this into a legal matter? Let them tangle with someone who has no issue with doing precisely that. They may be larger or have more means available to them than myself, but what about a corporation whose yearly net income numbers in the tens of billions? Go tangle with them for a while and see how long you last. A company of that size would have no trouble crushing Stickly Games like the bug that they are. But enough about that, let's get back on the topic of reviews in general. Apparently, there are a lot of fanboys out there that are up in arms over the fact that the new Legend of Zelda game was rated a 7 out of 10. And I'll admit, I nearly scoffed at the idea that so many people would lose their minds over such a simple thing, but to DDoS a critic's website, attack them verbally, wishing death upon them, and attempting to hack their social media accounts is beyond despicable. It's pathetic. It is horrific, and those type of actions make me disgusted to be associated with any one of them in any way, shape, or form. Now, some of you have heard me talk about fanboyism and the tribalist nature and attitudes associated with it in relation to Star Citizen and its exceptionally toxic forums. But this here is its true nature laid bare. This absolutely vile response to a review that, while positive, apparently wasn't positive enough in some people's eyes. And the reason being is, a great many people have been brainwashed into thinking that a score of 7 on a video game is actually a low or negative rating, and you can actually have Game Informer and GameStop to thank for that one. And yes, that is 100% accurate. It all came about when GameStop purchased Game Informer and turned it into their own little propaganda machine. This single publication caused the 10-point scaling system of rating video games to skew ever upward as GameStop made use of it to heavily influence sales. Typically, if a game is even capable of loading within the current game's media scoring system, it's granted an automatic 5.5. And if it works as advertised, it gets an automatic 6 or a 7. Now, it is this perception that has created this falsehood that 7 is a poor rating, and the simple fact that so many mindless simpletons are incapable of grasping that concept that has been drilled into their heads by the very corporations whose entire purpose in life is to drain every last shred of cash from your wallets absolutely sickens me. You typically will not find me speaking that harshly towards a group of people in such a way very often, but to actually attack a game's critic for such an affront as to not like a game as much as you like it, even though they actually do like the game, is deplorable in the extreme. And I have seen an uptick in trolls lashing out at me in regards to this as well. The aforementioned insane person that I mentioned at the beginning of this video had this to say last night. What exactly makes standards for software functionality objective? There's no difference between what is done to change the gameplay mechanics and what is done to make the software crash or not crash. Why the dichotomy? Crashes can be used as an intentional game mechanic, and if they're unintentional, the observer can still interpret it artistically. The likes of you and Jim Sterling, whose ass you seem to be sucking for nutritious slime, have no right to bully indie developers because the quality of their work doesn't match your standards. Why not just make videos complaining about submissions you don't like on DeviantArt or every other site that has user-submitted content? The only reason why I even care about you two fucks and every other unfunny loser whose only talent is hating other people is precisely that. You're actively hurting other people, along with making the gaming community a more toxic place. And this complete and utter mindlessly psychotic thinking is the standard of people that have been attacking both myself and Jim Sterling, and to all of them, to all of you, I have this to say. There is no dichotomy between a game's mechanics and its ability to function. They are purely separate, and anyone who honestly believes that a game crashing would be intentional by the creator of a game, or that it should be interpreted as anything less than the game not functioning as advertised, is clearly delusional and should seek legitimate psychological or psychiatric help. And that is in no way meant at an attempt at levity or humor in any way. That is a cold, hard truth. When you sell a game on the open market for money, then there are going to be specific expectations placed upon that game. The simple fact that it performs as advertised is first and foremost among them. And also, once you venture into that world of professionally selling your game, expect it to be critiqued. Critiqued by consumers, by online and offline publications, and yes, very much so by YouTube games critics as well. And this is not done maliciously. This is not done in an effort to harm indie developers or anyone else. Quite the opposite, in fact. This is done by those with a critical eye, sometimes a flair for the dramatic, and a passion for games. Those critics, like myself, and yes, like Jim Sterling, Total Biscuit, Angry Joe, and so many others out there in the world, do so because we felt we had a voice, that we had something to say and something to contribute to the gaming community. In an effort to inform and sometimes to entertain, critics ply their own eyes on games, inspecting core mechanics, graphics, frame rate, stability, story, play length, replayability, as well as a host of other factors that they deem important. And yes, Some use a scale. But I'm going to let you in on a secret. The scales are bullshit. They're an arbitrary rating based upon an entirely subjective ranking system. Some critics use them, some do not. And to be honest, it doesn't matter outside of the simple fact that some people like a numerical-based score. It is psychologically satisfying to them, as are so many other things, such as top 10 lists. Because humans think in a base 10 mathematical system, but in the end, it doesn't really mean anything except to assign a mathematical value to a critic's subjective interpretation of how they perceive the game in question. And some critics you will trust the opinion of, while others you might not. But it's not done maliciously. To do so would be to compromise one's own opinion, and people can and will find out about that. People are not stupid. And once it is outed that a critic is being dishonest, then typically their days are numbered. In spite of what this particularly vicious troll may say or think, critics are not toxic to the games industry. Quite the opposite. We help to keep it more honest because we have to be honest. Our credibility is our livelihood, and to compromise that would be far more damaging than we could ever hope to withstand. We have a duty to ourselves and to our viewers, and it is one that most of us take with the utmost seriousness. But to accuse a critic of being toxic to indie developers? Well, I suppose I will have to send a message to all of the indie developers out there that have been thanking me for my actions and tell them that they are wrong. That they don't know their own business and I'm actually harming them. I'm hurting them. It's ridiculous because it has no basis in fact or in reality. Without fair and open critique, games developers would be free to do whatever it is they please. AAA or indie dev alike would be able to take advantage of a system and produce lowest common denominator product and continue to charge ridiculous prices. No, critique makes this industry better. And if you think for 1 minute that I will be dissuaded from creating reviews and critique on my channel, then you will be sorely mistaken. I will not be bullied. And I will not tolerate someone making such assumptions. I will not be threatened. I will not be persuaded or cajoled, not by Dallas or Doki from Fur Fun, not by Dentola fucking Studios, not by Stickley Games, and most certainly not by a random troll who didn't even have the intestinal fortitude to face me publicly, but had to send a private message instead. And you're goddamn right, I will stand by Jim fucking Sterling when he is being attacked in such a way, and he is clearly in the right. You people wanted to see what it would take to get me angry? Well, now you know. Attack me all you want, but continued attacks on a fellow critic who is guilty of nothing more than doing their job is so utterly despicable and nauseating that I can scarcely find the words to describe it. But to all of you out there that value fair and legitimate critique, like and share this video. Post it on the gaming subreddit, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram even, I don't care. We need to look out for each other, YouTubers and gamers alike. Because we're all in this together. In spite of the shady developers and butthurt fanboys of the world, we do our best to protect you, but in turn, sometimes we need you to help protect us as well. And sometimes we YouTubers need to back each other up on top of it. And Jim Sterling had my back when I needed it, as did all of you. Now please show that same level of amazing support I know you were all capable of. Oh, and one more thing. I don't suck Jim Sterling's ass. It's painfully obvious that the Cornflake Homunculus and I are in a relationship, and I'm not the cheating kind, so kindly fuck off. I'm Sid Alpha, and I'll see you next time.